sheria itashikana na wao wakati mmoja. Hakuna swala ambalo linaweza kupitwa bila kuwa na sheria ambayo itaweza kufuatilia kuhakikisha kwamba wale ambao wameweza kupotezwa, wale ambao wameweza kuuliwa kiholela wameweza kulipwa ridhaa, ili familia ziamini kwamba haki imeweza kutendeka. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona serikali iliweza kulipa pesa nyingi kwa wale ambao walifungwa, ambao waliwekwa kizuizini bila ya kushtakiwa, na wengine wengi ambao waliteswa wakati wako mikononi mwa polisi. Na hii inaendelea sasa, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni ile ambayo ilikuwa inaendelea wakati wa serikali ya mstaafu Moi, hayati Daniel Arap Moi. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, tunasema kwamba wale ambao hivi sasa wanahusika, hata kama wewe ni director wa ATPU, ni director wa intelligence, ni director nani, hakuna kitu ambacho kitaweza kukulinda wewe wakati utakapostaafu ama utakapotoka katika kazi hiyo. Sheria itapambana na wewe na siku moja itaweza kukushika na kukupeleka jela, kama vile ambavyo unawatesa na kuwadhulumu haki zao wale wa Kenya ambao wameweza kushikwa bila sheria yoyote. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa kumalizia nasema pia kwamba yale mapendekezo yote ambayo yametolewa ni kweli yanaweza kufanya kazi, lakini pia Mheshimiwa Spika, tungependa kuwe na mwongozo kwa wale wote ambao familia zao ama wapendwa wao wameweza kuchukuliwa kiholela, wanapata fursa ya kuweza kujieleza masuala kama haya, kwa sababu wengi hivi sasa wanaogopa. Kama mtu anaambiwa kwamba mtoto wako amechukuliwa kwa sababu ni Al-Shabaab, hawezi hata kuzungumza na jirani yake, lakini wapewe fursa ya kuweza kuzungumza masuala haya kupitia labda kwa kamati za uwiano katika maeneo yao, ama kwa vile vikundi vya haki za binadamu ambazo zinafanya kazi kama vile Haki Afrika, Muhuri, Huria, Kenya National Human Rights Commission na mashirika mengi ambayo yanaweza kutoa msaada kama huu wakati wa majanga kama haya. Mheshimiwa Spika, kuna shirika la IMLU, Independent Medical Legal Unit, ambalo linafanya kazi kubwa sana kuhusiana na swala hili la watu kupotezwa kiholela. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, kupatikana nafasi ama kutolewe fursa ya haya mashirika yaweze kuwa na nafasi ya kuweza kuwa cancel ama kuwa nasihi wale ambao wameathirika, ili wasiweze kuona kwamba dunia imewacha mkono na wameweza kukata tamaa. Kwa hiyo mengi, Mheshimiwa Spika, nashukuru kwa kunipa fursa hii. Asante.
Senator Cheriot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this chance to make my contributions too on this very important report by the Senate's Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. Mr. Speaker, I had opportunity to follow actually the committee's trail of works as they began this particular exercise, as they pitched tent in Mombasa, and I watched a number actually of their, because many of their hearings, the public ones, were televised, and on many occasions it was sad listening to the families of many of these young people, and most of them are actually teenage sons or just slightly out of teenage that are forced to go through this very harrowing experience. And it presents to us a very dicey situation, Mr. Speaker. I say dicey because we are actually debating this report at a time when this matter is very alive in our country. You are aware, Mr. Speaker, that currently there are 5 terror suspects that are out at large, and the country is trying to, people are being informed that if you spot them anywhere, in fact, many families, people are questioning how it ended up that they escaped out of lawful custody, and you have this particular situation. And on many occasions, Mr. Speaker, when you speak to our law enforcement officers, the people, especially those that served in the anti-terrorism police unit, they share with you also the other side of the coin, what I would consider to be the side which human rights societies, and maybe sometimes even us, who are the watchdog institutions, do not like to tell. That indeed, it presents the country with a very difficult situation. It is first important, Mr. Speaker, to note that no country, not even those that pride themselves in being amongst the finest of democracies and those that have known the space and depth of human rights, have been able to successfully navigate this particular situation. You understand the struggle, for example, with even a country like the United States of America, with their detention facilities. These are matters that have been litigated in their courts. People have had arguments and counter-arguments on the need to balance human rights vis-a-vis the rights of the millions that are at stake just because you're trying to protect the rights of a single individual, you know, and there have been all manner of thoughts about this particular topic. Therefore, it's not as easy as sometimes we may want to reduce it. It's not one of those things where you can either just go left or right about. There is a need for a continuous, and I see that many of the proposals that are actually being made in the resolutions of this particular committee, Mr. Speaker, that are actually fairly progressive because it points out to institutions or perhaps bodies that we need to set up, which includes their recommendation number 1, Mr. Speaker, which is establishing of a strong multi-agency task force to ensure better synergy, collaboration, and cooperation between various agencies that seek to hold law enforcement officers accountable. You know, of course, the challenge that they speak onto and speak about is what our law enforcement officers have been able to do. But then, Mr. Speaker, it will still have been more important while we are setting up this particular institution to continue listening and perhaps work more closely. I haven't had opportunity to read through, but I have seen the 5 recommendations that this particular committee has given towards us. I appreciate that this is not a very small matter. It's not something that you'd wish any particular family to battle about. But from the very onset, Mr. Speaker, I've said that we need to be clear about one thing. There is no silver bullet solution to this issue of enforced disappearance and counterterrorism protocols, all these challenges that continue to bedevil our society, where we think that if we set up the multi-agency, we monitor and evaluate them, perhaps try and, because I've seen there's even a proposal to amend the National Corona Services under the National Corona Service Act number 18 to ensure that perhaps the various oversight institutions that oversight the police service are given better synergy in terms of this particular work. That answers only one side of the challenge, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately. Somebody needs to speak for our men and women in uniform. Somebody needs to narrate this from their perspective. And I have said that when the unfortunate thing about this particular debate, Mr. Speaker, is that when you speak as I am, you are actually challenged to pick a side. That either you are with us who are complaining about this enforced disappearance or you are with the police officers. I do not believe in that very narrow perspective of viewing this particular challenge, Mr. Speaker. I believe there can be a better way in which we can handle and ensure that if indeed there is credible evidence that showcases that a particular individual is a terror suspect, that they have been involved in activities that threaten the very existence of our society, then they are brought to book, that perhaps we build a proper judicial system that doesn't allow these leaks. Because, like I have said, Mr. Speaker, the challenge when you speak to ATPU officers is that they tell you, we have arrested some of these suspects, we have all the evidence pointing actually to their involvement in terrorism activities. They appear before a magistrate's court, and by afternoon they are walking scot-free. What do you do? Yet you know that you have taken a vow of office to ensure that citizens are well taken care of. Those are the challenges that our officers continue to face, and that's why you continue to read about these stories where some of these people, and if you read through the presentation by actually many of the NGO actors that came before this particular committee, I've seen the reports, the presentation that was made by Uhuru and the likes, is that actually some of these suspects, a good number of them, are immediately recaptured after leaving a courtroom, never to be seen again. By the time, I think if we address only the challenge of this disappearance without addressing what is it that makes a civilized police officer who has vowed to protect and defend our constitution resort to that kind of means, then we are missing the point by a huge mile, Mr. Speaker. And it will be unfortunate on this House if we do not address that particular issue. Because it tells you that there is a challenge. By the time an officer gives up on our judicial system and says, instead of arresting this fellow, running the risk of even them, actually, because, you know, the thing that many of these officers quote is that it's not even for the security of Kenyans anymore. It's about me as Aaron Cheruiyot, that I know I arrested suspect XYZ, presented him before a court of law. I know how dangerous that particular suspect is, and the magistrate, because of maybe our laws, has set him free. Therefore, even just to protect myself, they do the kind of things that people end up doing. Therefore, we must strike a particular balance. That's why I said perhaps maybe Senator Faki ought to have listened to me, because I said I do not want us to get to this particular point where you have to choose either between, are you with these people who are enforcing disappearance, or are we with the police? I don't know if he's followed through the argument, because I've said out of the 5 recommendations, and I'll come to the recommendations.
Yes, I can see an intervention by Senator Faki.
Mheshimiwa Spika, nimemsikiza ndugu yangu Senator Cheruiyot na nashangaa kwamba anajaribu kutetea uvunjaji wa sheria, kwamba mtu ameweza kushikwa akahukumiwa ama akapelekwa mahakamani na mahakama imesema huyu hana hatia, ama ushahidi wako haukutosha kuweza kumhukumu mtu huyu, alafu yule ambaye amemshika amekwenda akamchukua akamuua ama akamchukua akampeleka mahali ambapo pasipojulikana na familia yake wala wakili wake wala mtu yoyote katika Jamhuri ya Kenya ambaye aweza kusema kwamba mtu fulani yuko mahali fulani. Mheshimiwa Spika, tuko katika bunge hapa na bunge hili ndio linatunga sheria. Kwa hivyo ikiwa tutaweza kupuuza ama kusema kwamba ni haki yao mtu askari kuchukua mtu, kama ana ushahidi, taasisi ambazo zimeundwa na katiba za kuangalia nani ana ushahidi na nani hana ni mahakama. Na ikiwa mahakama wamesema hawana ushahidi wa kutosha, basi sehemu nyingine watu wanapewa fursa ya kuchunguzwa. Wanaendelea kuchunguzwa kila mara kwa mara, wanachunguzwa mpaka wafike kiwango kwa polisi waweze kuona kwamba huyu sasa hana tishio tena kwa usalama wa taifa. Lakini kusema kwamba wana haki, Mheshimiwa Spika, hiyo sio sawa. Asante.
Mr. Speaker, this is the danger that I was speaking about. That the unfortunate thing in this country, I think it emanates from the 2005 referendum of orange and banana. That's what I refer to it. Kenyans on many occasions want to pick either left, right on any particular issue. That you want to be either orange or banana. If Senator Mohamed Faki had listened to me, and I think I did a good job at explaining my point, I said there is no easy solution to this particular. What you're referring to, I was explaining why many of these officers resort to those kind of heinous acts. I didn't justify in any way that whatever they are doing is right. And therefore, the challenge that I was presenting to the committee is by addressing only one side of the problem, which is naming and pointing out to the challenges, to the evil things that many of these police officers do, without addressing that which led them to resort to this kind of extrajudicial killings, we will not have sorted the problem conclusively. That's my simple point, Mr. Speaker. I do not think in any way I have justified that it is right to kill any particular young person. And I think I was very clear about it.
I can see another intervention from Senator Chararge.
Yes.
Point of information, okay.
Mr. Speaker, just to inform Senator Cheruiyot is that...
No, I said I don't mind.
I thought we have only one speaker. Mr. Speaker, point of information, I wanted, without exposing any accused or a suspect to principle of double jeopardy, they are in cases where somebody is released and is being rearrested on different charges. So in as much as we don't agree with the modus operandi of the police of abductions without following the legal process, it would be also important that, and Kenyans are aware of this, that sometimes accused persons, when they are discharged or when they have been discharged from a case and avoiding principle of double jeopardy, there are cases where you can be rearrested when the police, because believe that there is a sufficient reason or on different charges. But if they are rearresting somebody on the same charges, I think it is illegal and it is very wrong. That is one point of information to Senator Aro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, that's very useful. And I want just Senate to engage Senator Faki of course with everyone else listening in, is that I said my presentation is based on a conversation that I had with an officer who works at ATPU. And I followed through the presentation. Actually, this was during the time when this committee was in Mombasa, and NTV aired these issues live. So I know a particular officer who served in this particular institution. I asked him, why would you guys do the kind of things that families are narrating? And he explained to me, sometimes the challenge is also on their side, which now I'm saying, as a house, we must equally rise up to that particular challenge, and so that we solve the issue conclusively. Because he said, listen to me, this is my job, but remember, I also have a family that I've got to take care of. Sometimes I've presented a particular suspect, now speaking to me about the generality of what informs his colleagues to get to do this kind of things. And he said, for one reason or the other, understanding how the Kenyan judicial system works, either through laws or gaps that exist therein, people are able to bribe their way out. You have a suspect who you presented and you have cocksure evidence that this particular person is dangerous to society. If you find out that that particular person is out, either on bail or through the means like the 5, look at the 5 that the country is now looking at. That's why I said this matter is very alive in our country right now. I hope you're all aware that there are 5 terror suspects that are out at large. Imagine the agony of those police officers who are handling that particular case. You have your family you've got to fear. If the DPP himself, the Director of Public Prosecutions, explained the other day, I watched an interview and he was saying, I personally fear for my life because of the cases that I've approved against terror suspects, yet I do not get sufficient protection. Therefore, the measures that are being proposed by this committee, I agree with them 100%. But that this solves for us half the problem only. It is good because it reminds our officers that at the end of the day, they took a vow to protect life. They must ensure that even suspects, even a suspect, and it doesn't matter whether it is a terror suspect or a suspect of fraud, have their own rights as well. And we must always ensure that we must strive to be a country that is governed by the rule of law. And we must ensure that we present before them. That's why I've seen on their recommendation number 3, on the various protocols that they want actually amended under the National Corona Service Act, that the mandate of National Corona Service is independently investigated and determine the cause of reported and natural deaths in the country. It also needs to provide for independent forensic and medical services, because I understand what they're saying, because many a times people find way. We know the issues. There was one incident, I think 2 or 3 years ago, about a suspect in Kilimani, where somebody dies and some doctor gives a report that, oh, it was a natural cause of death, and you wonder, this is somebody who, by the time they were being arrested, they were fully okay. There was no reported known illness that they were battling. But because people are able to quickly find their way out and shortchange or short-circuit the system, they are able to give this particular. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, this is my proposition. While I agree with each of and that is on the 3rd, the 4th one, of course, is our call to the international institutions offering training, actually. This is one of the solutions now. This is moving on to part of what I was proposing as the second half of the solution. That part of the things we need to engage in is not only solve it on the terror suspect side, but sort it also in terms of what do we do with the police officers. And I've seen a very good recommendation on training for many of these particular officers of ours. That on recommendation 4 proposes an enhanced training of these law enforcement officers on how to respect human rights, enable them to have a fair, just and humane treatment of persons, particularly in regards of their duties regarding arrest and many of these things. Because, on many occasions, even the manner, even an arrested person has rights. And those rights actually include the manner in which you arrest them. The right to be informed while they are being arrested, to be transported into safe custody in a humane way, not those old tactics that we used to read about of people being bundled in to booths and squeezed. These are some of the quick wins that we can enjoy, because you can ask of these particular officers that it's okay. We appreciate that you may have all the evidence against this particular, but it is not your duty as an officer to determine guilt or otherwise. You cannot have it both ways. You can only accuse, but it is upon a competent jury to make a determination and say this person is either guilty or innocent in this particular situation. This is not complete, though, Mr. Speaker, especially in their proposal for a multi-agency, if you do not involve the judiciary. The judiciary is a key player and a key stakeholder in this journey if we want to win this particular war. We must have also judges come and sit on a particular platform, the same avenue, though I do not know what the pragmatics of it will be, because I know in the dispensation of justice, a judge is not supposed to be influenced by any other force outside the matters that are playing out in their courtroom. And therefore, perhaps it might be prejudicial to have them sit in this particular committee, but even just to have their perspective. What is it that goes on in the mind of a judge? By the time evidence has been presented to them, you've been told these are the money transactions between this particular person and non-terror suspects. These are the weapons that they were caught with, but you still find them saying the evidence that has been presented before me is not sufficient. I cannot guarantee detention of this particular person, and therefore I let them free. And on many occasions, because it will be good for this multi-agency team to sit so that the evidence can be presented to them that on many occasions, many of these suspects actually jump bail. Before the time of their second or their next appearance in court, they are either out of the country, they have disappeared, never to be seen, or even commit certain heinous crimes against these particular officers. And that's what I was pointing out earlier, that these are the things that lead these officers to hunt them, because it's actually like a movie scene where you know there is somebody after my neck, therefore the quicker I can get to them also, it causes. Therefore, this multi-agency team that is being proposed, apart from just having the National Commission on Administration of Justice, and I understand, but my understanding of NCAJ is that it's an oversight institution. It will be good to have the perspective of the judiciary as well and have them form part and parcel of this task force so that they can present and perhaps even challenge the arresting officers with what is it in terms of their presentation of evidence before, together with DPP before a court of law, that will be able to persuade a judge on the need to detain some of these suspects. By and large, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I think a good colleague from Kilifi is following the presentation and helping me along it, but he makes me lose my trail of thought at it, but I know largely he agrees with what I'm saying. I was concluding, Mr. Speaker, because I know colleagues want to speak to this particular issue, by saying, very well done report by Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. This committee continues to distinguish themselves when given such an important assignment, but I hope in the little presentation I've been able to convince colleagues like Senator Faki and the rest who probably earlier in their presentation thought that I was picking a particular side. That my point remains, there are no quick wins to this particular problem, and it must be multi-pronged so that you ensure you protect the rights of the suspect, but also equally protect the rights of the men and women in uniform who go out of their way to ensure that you and I are safe. Because they are human beings like us, they have families, they've got also they wish to live long and happy so that they get to see better days. How are we able to pass recommendations, Mr. Speaker, that ensure that we successfully slay this particular challenge? Because it's a menace that basically every developing society continues to face, but we must lead the way and strive in ensuring that we solve this particular problem. Good job to Justice and Legal Affairs, Mr. Speaker, and I hope this can be actually attended to. I agree with the recent proposal. The only thing that I don't know is how quickly that can be brought to life on the need to restore the Senate's implementation committee. Because many good reports of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, continue actually to gather dust in our shells, because there is no specific committee whose mandate is to ensure that once we've passed a report such as this and you give it a vote, that actually the various government agencies and different players in the sector and follow through with what the people of Kenya have said through their representatives. With those many remarks, I support this report. Good work on the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee.
Okay, Senator Wetangula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to join colleagues who have contributed to this report. First and foremost, I salute the committee led by a distinguished colleague, Senator Omogeni, and a committee that has, I think, the highest concentration of lawyers in this House. Okongo Omogeni, a lawyer, Amos Wako, a lawyer, former Attorney General James Orengo, Fatuma Dulo, Kilonzo Jr., Irun Kangata. The only non-lawyers in the committee are the Bishop and Honorable Sakaja. But I'm sure...
Maybe the Bishop was praying for the, for the committee.
I'm sure by osmosis, the Bishop is now as a consummate a lawyer as Okio Mutata is.
There's a point of information from Senator Omogeni.
Yeah, so I just want to correct my good friend, Senator for Bungoma, that Senator Pogisho is not a member of our committee. Senator Pogisho.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't mention Bogisho. I called out the names of Okongo himself, Bishop, Amos Wako, Orengo, Fatuma, Mutula Kilonzo, Irun Kangata, and Sakaja. Sakaja, my distinguished nephew. Mr. Speaker, the issue of extrajudicial killings in this country is mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling because we have lost a lot of people who, in Mexico, they call it disappeared without a trace. There is even a famous movie called Without a Trace, where people just vanish and nobody gives answers when questions are asked. In this country, Mr. Speaker, we have no shortage of laws, we have no shortage of institutions to protect human rights, to protect individuals, protect their lives and property. We have enough laws, we have enough institutions. In fact, Mr. Speaker, some of the institutions are actually overlapping in mandate in trying to protect the lives of Kenyans. But this notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, looking at this report and the catalog that runs through, it tells you that the more we talk about this situation, the worse it becomes. It doesn't seem to be improving. And extrajudicial killings have been part and parcel of our public life in this country right from independence. And we have to get to a place where we have to stop it, Mr. Speaker. When you go to the coast where distinguished Senator Faki represents Mombasa and my brother, the retired judge, represents Kwale, you meet families that have long stories to tell, how their children are arrested and then they never appear again. My distinguished colleague Farhia is telling me, even in Northeastern. In fact, it's across the country. But the worst of these disappearances have been recorded from the coast region. In the context of fighting crime, Mr. Speaker, it cannot be condoned that in the process of fighting crime, you commit more crimes along the way. Then that does not help society. I agree with the recommendation, Mr. Speaker, recommendation number 4, enhance training of law enforcement officers in the respect of human rights. Mr. Speaker, it does appear when you compare with other jurisdictions, somebody keeps on joking that if you are in London or in more developed countries, when you have a problem and you see a policeman, your problems get solved. In Kenya, when you are in problems and you see a policeman, your problems multiply. Because, Mr. Speaker, things don't work the way they should. We have gone through cases, Mr. Speaker, even when we were at the university, where you encounter the police and the first question they ask you is how much money do you have. If you have no money, they frame you as a rogue and vagabond, just because you don't have money. Luckily, that crime was edited out of our criminal law justice system, and now they use other methods. People have been shot. You get an explanation, Mr. Speaker, that an accused person who was in custody was running away, escaping from lawful custody, and that's why the police shot him. But when you go to post-mortem, you find that the bullet that hit this person who was running away came from the front. So you cannot be shot in the chest if the person shooting is shooting you because you are running away. These are all bizarre explanations, Mr. Speaker, that we need to check. In the right run-up to the new constitution, Mr. Speaker, we kept on asking ourselves the cardinal legal question: who will watch the watchers? Who will police the police? These were big questions, Mr. Speaker, that informed the creation of the National Police Oversight Authority, IPOA, the Police Commission that was started off by Mr. Kavuludi, and turning the police from a force to a service. Because in the past, Mr. Speaker, prior to 2010, we had a police force. And it does appear that our police used to misinterpret the meaning of force and felt that they have to use actual force on citizens. Today, Mr. Speaker, we have a police service. And when we were interviewing the current Inspector General, he told us in our committee, Mr. Speaker, that he was going to be a reformist Inspector General of Police. We would encourage the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs, Mr. Speaker, to have periodic meetings with the Inspector General to get appraised on what reforms are being carried out. Because the more we talk about extrajudicial killings, the more people get killed, people get shot, people dying in custody, people are arrested, kidnapped, and you never get to know where they go. This, Mr. Speaker, can be explained by the inordinate number of dead bodies that are dumped in rivers in Murang'a, rivers in Kiambu. People disappear. Eventually, you are told the body was found in Donyo Sabuk in a river, tied in a sack, dismembered. And individual citizens, Mr. Speaker, very few would have the capacity to do those kind of things. I cannot imagine a situation where an individual can kidnap 2-3 people alone and go and dismember their bodies and throw them into a body of water. All this, the buck ends on the desk of the Inspector General. And going forward, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge that these recommendations be furnished on the Interior Ministry, on the Police Commission, on IPOA, and on the Inspector General of the Police and his team. I say so, Mr. Speaker, because we have continuously had a situation where brute force seems to be the modus of operation as against persuasion. Ordinarily, Mr. Speaker, when the police want to arrest somebody, of course there are extraneous cases where somebody is described as armed and dangerous. But ordinary people don't bear arms. And you find a platoon of 20, 30 policemen going to arrest a harmless MP, like we saw in the case of Senator Lelengwe, Senator Malala, Senator Langat, when actually it is improper deployment of our police officers. Because 1 or 2 policemen can go and arrest a helpless senator like Cherargei here. Why should you deploy 20? It doesn't help. And they go there armed with AK-47s as if they're going to arrest a robber, a legislator. Mr. Speaker, we need to make it abundantly clear that any public officer who is involved in extrajudicial killings takes personal responsibility. We should not have any vicarious responsibility in this case. Any policeman who shoots anybody without justification must be arrested and charged with a homicide, whether it is murder or manslaughter. That will be the decision of the DPP. But we must make it difficult, we must make it painful for people who engage in extrajudicial killings of our people. Mr. Speaker, you heard of the case the other day of a lawyer, Nandwa, and his client, who just disappeared. A week later, we were told he was dropped by some vehicle in Mwingi. And I want to encourage him. I'm told he has refused to talk. We don't know what they did to him. I would encourage Mr. Nandu, as a learned friend and a custodian of people's rights, to come forward and tell us so that we can be able to stop this kind of behavior. His client is gone. We don't know where he is. I met, Mr. Speaker, a lady in Mombasa in one of my visits. And this lady came to see me and cried for 1 hour, sitting with me, telling me how her first son disappeared. The body has never been found. Second son disappeared. The body has never been found. Third son disappeared. She had 4 sons, now she's left with 1. The other 3 are gone. And there is no hope that they will be found because they were arrested by a unit of the police called ATPU or something like that, the anti-terror unit. We want to support our police in fighting crime, Mr. Speaker. We want to support the state and the government in protecting innocent Kenyans. We want to support the state, Mr. Speaker, in pursuing criminals through due process, because everybody is presumed innocent until they are declared guilty by a court of law. And anybody who engages in unlawful killing commits a crime. Anybody who arrests people and keeps them in custody for inordinately long times commits a crime. And I want to encourage, Mr. Speaker, Senator Mogeni, that when you engage IPOA has been doing a good job here and there, but they're crybabies. They're constantly complaining. And if IPOA is complaining, a constitutional body, commission, that is supposed to protect innocent Kenyans, is crying louder than the innocent Kenyans, who will then protect innocent Kenyans, Mr. Speaker? We want to see that the training of our police officers in Kiganjo has a fundamental lining of respect for human rights, in understanding that the innocence of every individual is sacrosanct until pronounced otherwise by a court of law. I say this, Mr. Speaker, because today is not like those old days, Madam Speaker, where we had very limited availability of courts. Today, there is not a single area in this country where you cannot find a court of law, manned by professionally trained magistrates and judges. So the issue of holding people for inordinately long time, eventually killing them. We used to have, Mr. Speaker, a man in this town called Patrick Shaw. He was a white policeman who was connected with Starehe Boys Center. The number of people that white man killed in this country, Mr. Speaker, will come around to haunt us. That man used to arrest people, drive them to Karura Forest, and then he releases you and tells you, you can now run back home. As you run, a bullet in your back. This happened with one famous footballer called Nicodemus Arudhi. Nicodemus Arudhi, Madam Speaker, was a player of Gor Mahia or Luo Union, one of the 2 teams. And rumor has it that he used to keep bad company. This Muzungu arrested him, and the next day they found his body in the mortuary with bullet wounds. And when such a thing happens, Mr. Speaker, you don't need to ask yourself serious questions. Lawyers say res ipsa loquitur, Mr. Speaker. Things speak for themselves. If you are the last person seen holding the bishop and walking her away, and she's later found dead, things will speak for themselves, that it must be you until it is proved otherwise, that you are the one who has caused the loss of life. We must, as a country, Mr. Speaker, now we are no longer a hippie country. We are classified as a middle-level developed country. We are not in the same league as Burundi and many of our East African partners like South Sudan. Our growth in economy must also measure with our growth in the sophistication of how we manage our affairs as a country. The Chief Justice, the new Chief Justice, Madam Speaker, has been talking of making it easy for people to go through the mill of justice. We want to see, Madam Speaker, and the DPP has been quite good at this because he has not been rushing people to court. In comparable jurisdictions like the US, Madam Speaker, when the DPP takes you to court, he has a file ready and hearing can start as soon as is practically possible, depending on the availability of court time. Here, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, you are taken to court and the police tell you investigations are still going on. We want to hold this suspect. If investigations are still going on, how do you arrive at preferring a charge against an individual? Because you are still investigating. You may be preferring a charge of pickpocketing when in fact the eventual charge will be robbery with violence. We want to see people being taken to court when investigations have been done, concluded, and the DPP has approved that this in fact is the correct charge, a sustainable charge, then people are taken to court. Looking back, Madam Speaker, these killings have not been limited to the low end of society. We have the cases of Pio Pindo, we have the cases of Tom Mboya, we have the cases of J.M. Kariuki, we have the cases of Kung Karumba, we have the cases of many, many other people, of late Tony Ndilinge, the MP for Kilome, and others, who have fallen from the hand of a gun-wielding person. We have, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, a group among the police that this committee also needed to have talked to. They are called police reservists. Police reservists are a vigilante group set up in various places and armed to help the police in combating crime. But many of them are not properly trained in handling weapons, and sometimes they abuse these weapons. When we went to Laikipia on a fact-finding mission with our distinguished senator here, we had the people of Laikipia crying that they want reservists back because they help. But by the time you take them back, we want them to be trained. The training of the police in England, in America, and everywhere is, if a person is aggressive and is difficult to arrest, you maim him to arrest, you don't kill. Shoot him in the leg, if you have to, before you arrest him if he's menacing you with a weapon. But here in Kenya, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, the aim is at the head, the aim is in the chest where the heart is, and people just die in a manner that is regrettable. This report, Madam Speaker, is so well written, is so thorough in research, that I would want to urge the whole House to support it. We also have, Madam Speaker, what they have called a Victim Protection Board, which, again, sometimes when there are excesses of the police, people fear going forward, because when they tell the truth, they become even bigger targets. And when they are protected under the law, like witness protection, it helps in finding facts and getting things done. Today, Madam Speaker, I dare say that we have no shortage of young, educated Kenyans who can be police officers. If the police has bad apples, and I remember when I visited the IG recently and talked to him about what we saw in Laikipia, he said, yes, we know we have some rotten apples among the police, and we need to weed them out. They should be weeded out as quickly as yesterday, so that we have a police force that is responsive, that is responsible, that respects human rights, that respects private property, that respects the doctrine of innocence until proved guilty. If we don't have this, Madam Speaker, we'll continue every year crying about extrajudicial killings, and it goes on unabated. I also want to encourage, Madam Speaker, that there should be continuous refresher courses.
Senator, there is a point of order from Senator Nderitu.
Senator Nderitu.
Nderitu of Laikipia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to concur with what is a point of information. I want to concur with what my colleague is saying about Laikipia. And in fact, when he mentioned the National Police Reservist, we had about 832, but when they were withdrawn...
So it's a point of information?
I want to inform him so that there can be clarity, Madam Speaker. In Laikipia, we didn't have the rogue National Police Reservist, Madam Speaker. And when my colleague was in Laikipia, people of Laikipia, they were very clear. In fact, they were excited to see Weta. And they told him that if they go back their National Police Reservist, they will be more than contented. Because when we had those police reservists, this insecurity was the thing of the past. But when they were withdrawn, Madam Speaker, in the pretense that they wanted to do the ballistic test for the guns that they had, plus checking the certificate of good conduct for these police reservists, that's when the rain started beating us. So I want to say this, Madam Speaker, or to tell my colleague that the National Police Reservists, if they are brought back in Laikipia, and many of them were trained, we are not going to have this insecurity problem. I want to assure him that I know he's a member of Security Committee, that if we get back our National Police Reservists, we might not need even more police officers. Our people know the terrain very well of Laikipia County, especially the Laikipia Nature Conservancy. They can handle the insecurity better. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, my time has been saved. Thank you for that information. In fact, I had already said that in Laikipia, the population was crying for police reservists. What I'm recommending to the committee as we go along in pursuing these reforms, one, Madam Speaker, police reservists should be competitively recruited. Two, they should be trained in handling weapons. Three, they should be trained in respecting human rights. In certain places like Laikipia, Madam Speaker, we found overwhelming support for police reservists. In other areas, there is complete disdain and fright about the presence of police reservists. So how do we harmonize it? Number one, train them. Number two, put them on some stipend so that they don't start thinking, Madam Speaker, that as private citizens in the villages, he has been given a gun, and that gun is his source of livelihood. So that when they cannot make ends meet, they could abuse those guns to put food on their family's tables. They should also be given some stipend from the national coffers, because they're part of the community policing that we have in many parts of the country. And where they do a good job, we must acknowledge. Where they don't do a good job, we must say so and improve. I remember Senator Lonyangapo in the last parliament, Madam Speaker, brought here a bill where he wanted police service to be recognized, to be adopted, and to be paid some form of salary to make sure that they do a good job. In fact, there are some places in this country, Madam Speaker, where ordinary police don't exist. If you go like Kapedo, if you go like Suguta Valley, if you go to some parts of West Pokot, if you go to some parts of Turkana, you will find, Madam Speaker, that the police are a supplement to the primary duty the people themselves do. If you land in Lodwar, Madam Speaker, and you drive to a place like Nakodok, like Nadapal, you will be surprised, you see, and this we salute our women. You see, a mama is carrying water on her head, a baby on her back, and a Kalashnikov on her shoulder to protect her livestock, to protect her family, and to protect society. We would want to see, Madam Speaker, that the many police that we recruit are deployed in those places with serious security challenges. Marsabit, Turkana, Isiolo, Samburu, Laikipia, Tana River, Lamu, and many other places, so that people can enjoy the freedom that our forefathers fought for. So this report, Madam Speaker, is good. It makes far-reaching recommendations. And as I've always said, Madam Speaker, and you and the rest of the leadership of this House in Senate Business Committee, until and unless you bring back the implementation committee to this House, this report will just be one of the statistics of reports brought to the House. Because once it is done, it will be kept away, it will gather dust, nobody will hold anybody to account, nobody will call the IG to ask whether they have set up a training system on human rights. But when we have an implementation committee, it will catalog appearances from various government agencies to see how resolutions of this House are being implemented, how resolutions of this House are being actualized, how resolutions of this House make meaning to find their ways into legislation and policy formulation for the government. So I want to encourage Madam Speaker, and the Speaker announced here that we are going to have an implementation committee back. We need it as early as yesterday. You and I, Madam Speaker, you remember the far-reaching recommendations we made on the maize inquiry, which included reforming cereals board, subsidies for the farmers, and so on and so forth, with good interventions by the state to help farmers. Nobody talks about it anymore because there's no implementation committee that will call back the Minister for Agriculture and say, the Senate passed this resolution, what have you done about it? Without that, Madam Speaker, our debates here end up being academic discourses that sometimes don't do much in improving the lot of our country. Be that as it may, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the committee and the distinguished colleagues in it for working so hard to bring a report of this nature that will help in a very big way, if properly implemented, in doing away with extrajudicial killings, maimings of people, kidnapping of people, and incarcerating people for long, long period. Allow me 1 minute to finish by saying this, Madam Speaker. There was a boy called Masten Wanjala. This boy confessed that he killed 14 children and was sucking their blood as he killed them. This boy was arrested. And I would want Senator Mugeni, even on your own motion, to look at this case. This boy was arrested. He confessed to all these killings, and one would expect that he was taken to court and put in high security remand in committee or elsewhere. What did we learn, Madam Speaker? That the boy was in a Jogoo Road police station and walked away free. He went home, and the boy happened to come from my village. He had the first victim of his heinous crime, Madam Speaker, was a child in my village. He had slaughtered a child, sucked blood, and disappeared. So when he appeared at home, the villagers just came out and administered justice on him. But that way, Madam Speaker, will never get to know whether this boy had acted alone in killing 14 children or he had acted with others whom we now will never get to know. If he was taken through due process, probably would have known potential pedophiles like him. I want Senator Mugen and his team to find out how, after 2 months in custody, did this boy find himself in a police cell to escape and go away the way he did. Madam Speaker, I beg to support the report.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Harkura Kodana, is he online? Harkura online? Okay, Senator Wako Naomi Jilo.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to once again add my voice to this, because I'm saying that because I'm a committee member, and Senator Wetangula clearly said that I am the only committee member who is not a lawyer. But with now my experience, I think I can look for a certificate. So I'm glad to be there, and not only as a member, but as a vice chair. So I'm proud of what our committee has done under the guidance of our able chair. And in doing this, Madam Speaker, the committee has given this a lot of attention, and the matter has also attracted a lot of attention even from all the opinion leaders and the people who participated. Madam Speaker, the issue of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearance in Kenya has been of grave concern for quite a while. And we know that there are parts of this country, like where I come from, Marsabit County, Isiolo, Nairobi here, and especially Isli and some other parts of this country, this county, where we have lost lots of young people under these extrajudicial killings. And especially the coast area, the coastal part of this country have suffered a lot as a result of this. Madam Speaker, when you interact with the people who have lost their loved ones in these extrajudicial killings, they live in a lot of pain. Mothers cannot explain, and the sad part of it is they still expect their sons to come back to them one day. Madam Speaker, it is quite saddening that, you know, people try to find justice for their loved ones and they have no one to turn to. So as we were dealing with this, under chapter 1 and the introduction, number 5 of that, Article 26 of the Constitution guarantees every Kenyan the right to life, and specifically states that a person shall not be deprived of life intentionally, while Article 29 of the Constitution provides for the freedom and security of the person, which includes the right not to be subjected to torture or treatment or punishment to ensure access to justice for all persons. Article 48 sets out the right of arrested person, Article 49, and grants to every person that the right to fair hearing, including the right to be presumed innocent until the contrary is proved. Madam Speaker, many are the times when Kenyans who fall to be victims are not even given this opportunity. And that is why, Madam Speaker, as I support this report, I also support the proposal by Senator Wetangula that implementation committee should be set and should be put in place so that all our recommendations can also be considered, and someone or a committee can do a follow-up so that one day Kenyans can for sure know that what we have done as a committee has been given proper attention. Madam Speaker, when we look at the challenges faced in reducing impunity in the fight against extrajudicial killing and enforcement disappearance, that is where the real issues has been brought out. Number one of that is, while there are many actors handling matters relating to complaints against law enforcement officers, there is lack of proper coordination and cooperation among agencies. Madam Speaker, this is one of the main problems that, or the hindrance that has been there. There is no proper coordination between the agencies or the corporations, and that has been one major hindrance. And Madam Speaker, that is why we have all the challenges that we have faced as a country. Again, Madam Speaker, under the recommendations, because I want to be brief, under the recommendations, we have said different things should be put in place, and if we do that, then we'll be able to reduce. Madam Speaker, in this country, many people have lost their lives, and they keep losing. And these days, you cannot even know whether the citizens themselves are killing each other or it is the police killing Kenyans. Because what you see in our country is like no one is in control and no one is taking care of people's lives. Madam Speaker, and our recommendations, we have said establish a strong multi-agency task force to ensure better synergy, collaboration, and cooperation between the various agencies that seek to hold law enforcement officers accountable. Many are the times, Madam Speaker, the officers who have done this have been left and have been freed, and they can continue doing. Sometimes they are even transferred from one place to another. And many other times even, places like Marsabit and other remote areas, you know, all the criminals who have one time done this are taken to places like northern part of Kenya for disciplinary action. And that means then we will never get out of the problem that we are facing today. But once the recommendations that we have made here will be put in place, then even those who have lost their loved ones will have peace in their hearts. Madam Speaker, our recommendation number 2 and 3 and 5 are the areas that I just want to mention so that even as we speak about this, then we know that the committee has given a lot of attention to this. Number 2, we are saying the development of monitoring and evaluation plan for the envisaged multi-agency task force. The plan should set out clear indicators to track complaints, investigation, prosecution, and final outcomes of the cases on EJK and ED. Madam Speaker, in our today's world, without monitoring and evaluation, we know very well that nothing much happens. But when this will be put in place, then we know that even the investigations done and any complaint that has been there will be given proper attention, because there'll be timings and people will give a lot of attention so that before that time lapses, then proper report will be given. Madam Speaker, number 4, we are saying enhanced training of law enforcement officers. Many senators have referred to this. We have seen that the officers in place are mishandling Kenyans. They are mistreating Kenyans as they handle them. And enhancing training for them or capacity building will help them to handle these Kenyans like any other human being, a respected person, and they will have, you know, even if they apply law, then they will know that they are human beings like them. Madam Speaker, number 5, again, our recommendation, the Victim Protection Board can only compensate families of victims of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearance based on the actual conviction of an accused person in criminal case. It is important to enhance the capacity of both the POA and ODTP to successfully investigate. Unless we empower a POA and ODTP, Madam Speaker, then we know that there is no investigation that can be done and can be concluded. Currently, they are facing some financial constraints, and some of them need capacity building. And if we do that, then we know that these institutions will improve in what they are doing, and Kenyans will benefit a lot from this. Madam Speaker, I fully support the report, and I also commend the work done by our committee and pray that we will continue with that good spirit, because we have been doing some great work for this House. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Inima, Gertrude Musurube.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support the report that has been brought on the floor of this House. In fact, it was brought yesterday by Senator Omogeni concerning extrajudicial killing in this country. Honorable Speaker, I strongly support this report because it is in line with the Constitution. When you look at Article 26 of the Constitution, it is very clear that everyone has a right to life. And in fact, no one's life, no Kenyan's life should be taken away intentionally, Honorable Speaker. And we've been having a number of complaints. Some of the complaints, most of them we see on the media. And I want to commend the media for also bringing this to our attention. You know, as their watchdog role, they're able to bring out what exactly is happening so that we can see where there's any unfairness and we speak about it on the floor of this House. And if there's any action to be done, then we need, as senators, to see how we can act in order to protect Kenyans, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is actually unacceptable for the police to just, decide to take away people's lives like that, because the police have a role in protecting, Kenyans. The police have a role in ensuring that everyone is safe, Honorable Speaker. And even as we talk about these extrajudicial, disappearances and killings, Honorable Speaker, I want to really bring the pain that I'm going through as a legislator from Lugari, just on my backyard, Honorable Speaker, at Maram in Mwamba. About 3 weeks ago, some police officers went to Sachi's house around 6 o'clock in the morning, and they just decided to take away Sachi's son, called, Wamalwa. And they say that it was said that he was seen in the forest doing this and that, stealing timber. He did not steal, Honorable Speaker. And as you're speaking right now, he was taken by the police, and he was not even taken to Tarbo police station. He was even taken in Eldoret, and he was imprisoned, Honorable Speaker, because he just gave in to the accusations that, yes, he did this and that, but he actually did not do. And the family is really in pain. They are thinking of how can they raise money to get him out of court. They're even thinking of selling their piece of land, Honorable Speaker. This is just one of the incidents that very many Kenyans are going through, Honorable Speaker. And as a House, you have to see how to protect Kenyans at a time when, sometimes the police can just be happy, trigger happy, or they just want to, lock people without any reasonable cause. Honorable Speaker, it is also constitutional. When you look at Article 43(3), it is very clear, Honorable Speaker, that the state has to provide social protection, even for Kenyans who are not able to protect themselves and their families. It is the mandate of the state to ensure that they're protecting that Kenyan, Honorable Speaker. As senators, we are here to defend the Constitution. We are actually here to represent Kenyans, Honorable Speaker, and that is our business, Honorable Speaker. Kenyans have employed us. They brought us to this House so that we can speak out their issues without any fear, without any doubt, Honorable Speaker, so that when it comes to the law, it should be followed to the latter, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the issue of disappearances has been, very frequent. Like just recently on television, I saw the issue of the lecturer, Dr. Nadwa, who disappeared, Honorable Speaker, and then he was found after some time. He's not the only one who disappeared. Even in Kitengela, there are so many reports that have come up where children are just disappearing from their homesteads. Then eventually they are found murdered, Honorable Speaker. This is something that must actually come to an end, Honorable Speaker. Now, as Kenyans, we have to see, as legislators, we have to see and investigate what is the cause of extrajudicial, disappearances, what is the cause of extrajudicial killings. The cause must be established, Honorable Speaker, because unless we know the cause, it is not possible to bring the curve down of extrajudicial killings, Honorable Speaker, in this country. And Honorable Speaker, I commend the report by Senator Omogeni. Senator Omogeni and his group, made sure that they've come up with a very, very elaborate report, Honorable Speaker. And they've been able to interact with quite a number of agencies that are actually keen and that are keen on issues of extrajudicial killings and how to bring it to a stop. They were able to meet Huria, they were able to meet Amnesty International, Haki Africa, Muslims for Human Rights, Maendeleo ya Wanawake, and there is empirical evidence that extrajudicial killings have been taking place, Honorable Speaker, because the committee was even able to talk to families themselves, the afflicted families, like the example of Mohammed Khalifa. Khalifa's son was just going to buy a watermelon, but he never came back, Honorable Speaker. He just disappeared, and there was even evidence that he was picked by about 5 policemen who had walkie-talkies, and that was the end of him, Honorable Speaker. And even though there are witnesses, up to now, the police have not been brought to book. Another example of Major, who is also a resident of Bamburi. His son was dropping visitors, and he never came back, Honorable Speaker. That was the end of him. He just went like that, Honorable Speaker. And also the case of Farah Abdi, who just disappeared like that. So you can imagine, Honorable Speaker, what these families are going through. And even they were able to meet the families of those who are affected. And it came out clearly, Honorable Speaker, that these families are going through economic difficulties, Honorable Speaker, because if a breadwinner is jailed, if a breadwinner disappears and doesn't come back, Honorable Speaker, there's school fees to be paid. Honorable Speaker, you can imagine that such a family is losing a breadwinner. There's no one to pay school fees, so it means that the children will not go to school. There's no one even to provide food on the table, Honorable Speaker. So it means also the children will be economically affected. The children will suffer from hunger, and we must ensure that we are adhering to SDGs, that everyone should be free from hunger, Honorable Speaker. We must ensure that we are also adhering to the Constitution, Article 43, on socio-economic rights, Honorable Speaker. Everyone has a right, and every child in this country, Honorable Speaker, has a right to go to school, Honorable Speaker. It is unfortunate, it is painful if a child does not go to school simply because her parents have been shot by the police. Her parents is in the cells, Honorable Speaker. Even as I talk about the issue of Amala's son, Maram in Lugari, where I come from, you can imagine his children are not going to school because he has been in prison, Honorable Speaker, and the family does not know what to do. They want to sell their piece of land. And at this particular time, Honorable Speaker, who has the money to buy a piece of land? And it is unfortunate that even a family can decide to sell its land so that they can get their son out of prison, Honorable Speaker. Land is a factor of production. It is a collateral that can be used anytime, Honorable Speaker. So you can imagine if this family loses land, it means they cannot even borrow any loan, from the bank in order to do any development. It means if they sell, Honorable Speaker, they cannot even have their plantains, Honorable Speaker. And you're talking about just maize for use for the family, Honorable Speaker. So as a Senate, Honorable Speaker, we have to ensure that this report by Senator Omogeni, we follow it up to the latter, Honorable Speaker. And I'm happy because the committee has also come up with a raft of recommendations, Honorable Speaker. And I'm happy because even these recommendations have a time frame. Some of the recommendations they have decided it should be immediate. Others, it should be continuous. Others, it should be between 2021 to 2022, Honorable Speaker. The raft of recommendations the committee has come up with, about 22, recommendations, should be followed, Honorable Speaker. So I want to say, Honorable Speaker, there is need even for compensation of those people who are killed. Their families should be compensated. Like, if your father is killed, your mother is killed, unlawfully, and you're not going to school, that family should be compensated, Honorable Speaker. And when you're talking of compensation, it should be a lifetime compensation, Honorable Speaker. We are not talking of about 2 million. We are not talking about 3 million. It should be a life compensation, Honorable Speaker. I want to give an example of, Honorable Speaker, what happened during the American embassy when the Americans were compensating the lives, families of those who lost their lives, during the American embassy, bomb blast. The compensation was for a lifetime, so that even if people lost their fathers, their mothers, the children continue to go to school. The American embassy also ensured that they built a shelter for the family. So it was a life compensation. Honorable Speaker, I'm talking about a very serious issue. An issue where the key bread owner, the key winner is not there, Honorable Speaker, has been killed and has been killed unfairly. Honorable Speaker, what kind of compensation can we give such a family when the children cannot go to school, when maybe they have to sell their land, when maybe even, Honorable Speaker, in terms of medication, they cannot receive medication, Honorable Speaker, because maybe these children were under the cover of their father, who has actually, died. Honorable Speaker, life is sacred, and nobody should even think of taking away somebody's life, Honorable Speaker. You can imagine, Honorable Speaker, even your child, just escorting a visitor, and your child does not come back. And Honorable Speaker, you're supposed to contain that. It is not easy to get children, Honorable Speaker. It is a blessing from God, Honorable Speaker. When it comes to, to birth, it is a blessing, Honorable Speaker. But when it comes to death, it should not be intentional. Honorable Speaker, people should be able to die and go to their maker when the maker has decided, but not because the police are trigger happy, not because of extrajudicial killing, not because somebody has just been abducted and has gone away, Honorable Speaker. There is need for the Senate to ensure that it is intervening with speed and ensuring that the raft of recommendations that the Senator Mogeni committee has recommended is followed to the dot, Honorable Speaker. I feel the pain of those who have lost their parents because of extrajudicial killing. I feel the pain of that mother who gave birth to that child, who is in prison unlawfully, Honorable Speaker. Like the case of Omala, I'm talking about my neighbor, Honorable Speaker. They've been told to pay 60,000. But 60,000 is a lot of money, given the fact that this is a family that is really struggling to make a living, Honorable Speaker. There is need for fairness, even when people are actually in prison, Honorable Speaker. This boy was just taken from his backyard, and the police came for him very early in the morning, even before people started working. And the mother was just there helpless. There's nothing you'd have done. And they told the boy, when you go there, just accept because you don't know what will happen to you. So that is intimidation, Honorable Speaker. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, there is need for the Senate to even ensure that Wamalwa's son, Sachi's son, is released under no strings, Honorable Speaker, because the villagers are confirming that he did not go to the forest to steal any timber. He did not do anything. He was just taken from his father's house, and then he was taken to prison, Honorable Speaker. I feel the pain of that family. I feel the pain of many families whose parents are actually in prison, not because they did anything wrong, but because even things were planted on them, like the issue of Sachi's son. The police also came with timber, and they decided, they planted on him that he went stealing timber, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, there is need for Kenyans to have fairness. When it comes to justice, Honorable Speaker, it should not be delayed. It's a big crime, Honorable Speaker. Justice must be immediate, Honorable Speaker. So I support the report of this, the report herein, and I recommend that we support, all of us as senators support this report so that Kenyans can get justice, Honorable Speaker. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Harkura Kodana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to support this motion on the adoption of this motion on the adoption of the Senate Committee on the report of the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights on the inquiry into extrajudicial killing and enforced disappearance in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the committee for the work it has done in going through the existing situation we are in on extrajudicial killing and enforced disappearances, which is affecting many Kenyans. The committee has come up with a very elaborate report, which clearly gives a background on what they did and how they did, the many organizations they met, and the inputs of those organizations. And finally, the law, where there are gaps and in their recommendations, is a very clear matrix which assigns, because matrices, whenever developed, must assign responsibilities to institutions or individuals and give time frame during which they should submit to the Senate or to the committee. And it's very clear, you could see they have recommendations on legislative aspects where they have the recommendation, they act at the timelines and oversight by the committee or oversight and the time when they need to submit the recommendations. Madam Speaker, this is a live issue in this country, the issue of extrajudicial killing, which is clearly even defined as the arbitrary deprivation of life by government authority or individuals without the sanction of any judicial proceeding or legal process, where Kenyans are picked and the next day you hear they have been killed. Sometimes even up to now, families have not traced the whereabouts of their loved ones who are picked by individuals who are believed to be government officers. Even on the issue of the enforced disappearances, they have provided a very clear definition, which is arrest, detention, abduction, or any other form of deprivation of liberty by agents of the state or by persons or groups of persons acting with authorization, support, or acquaintance of the state, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty or by concealment of fate or whereabouts of the disappeared person, which places such a person outside the protection of law. Madam Speaker, this is what actually is happening in this country, and the various institutions which the committee interacted with have given very detailed data. I was looking at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, which gave, since 2013, they have documented 1,040 cases of extrajudicial killing and enforced disappearances attributed to security agencies. These are very big number of Kenyans who have lost their right to legal representation, even if they are suspected to have committed any crime. I believe the government is powerful enough to restrain any individual from committing crime, and it has all the tools and the law on its side so that it doesn't result to this act. These are acts of weakling of an individual who has no other powers to restrain somebody. It's only that kind of an individual who can resort to extrajudicial killings. But unfortunately, the government, with all its machinery, with all the state power, cannot restrain individual within the confines of law. It goes ahead and commits this kind of crime against its own people. Madam Speaker, in this country, right now, currently, the people who are facing the brunt of this case of extrajudicial killing and enforced disappearances are Muslims. If you look at the figures here, I'm sure if you ask these organizations to break down, you'll find most of them, over 80% will be Muslims. But this is for now. If you check the history of this country, it has not been Muslims always. In the 80s, it has been Kenyans from different backgrounds who are agitating for democratic space. The more Kenya issues of the 80s, where the dreaded special branch has been practicing this kind of crimes against Kenyans, is not lost on us. After that, it was the Mungiki, a particular group of youth who are dissatisfied with the social situations they are in, and the state has to use force against them also. So this kind of terror perpetrated by the states against its own citizens is not acceptable, and that is why in our 2010 Constitution, Article 26, talks very clearly about, when we enacted the Constitution, we talked very clearly about that, and we talked of a person shall not be deprived of life intentionally, under Article 26 of our Constitution of Kenya. So we were alive to this, and that's why we put this. But the way things are going, you find that the government is still using shortcuts, and in this war against terror, you'll find it's mainly youth, but of late, it has been youth who have been claimed to have been radicalized and being taken to Somalia to join Al-Shabaab. Now we are hearing it's ISIS, Islamic State, but scholars also have borne the brunt of this kind of abuse of law, where scholars have been killed, especially in the coast. And now, in the last few days or the last 2 months, it's even now moving to secular scholars. Secular scholars, I'll quote one of the scholars who was picked from the street of Nairobi in broad daylight. And he disappeared for 12 days. That is Abdul Wahab Sheikh Abdi Samad, who is the executive director of Horn of Africa, Institute of Horn of Africa for Strategic Studies. That is a very secular institution. Somebody who is a director of that kind of an institution is picked, he undergoes enforced disappearance. Then when he appears, somebody appears, and from their body language and their act, you see they have undergone a lot of terror. They don't want to now speak anything. And it's perpetuated by the state agencies. The other one was recently Professor Hassan Nandwa, a lawyer whose crime was representing a criminal. And I believe that's what lawyers do. If now it's even a crime to practice your profession as a lawyer, then I don't know how we are going to live in this country, because next time it will be a crime. Maybe you are picked because you are a senator, you spoke in the Senate. And the direction we are taking now, we have off even the assumed cases of terrorism. Now we are moving to silencing individuals for practicing their own legal professions, even like lawyers. Lawyers are supposed to represent all kinds of individuals, whatever crime you have committed, because the law gives you that right to defend yourself, and the accuser needs to prove the case they have against you, and there is enough law in this country. So, Madam Speaker, what we are practicing, or what these government officials are practicing, is outside the law, and they need to stop. And that is why this committee has come up with this report, which is detailed, and I hope the various state actors who are in this matrix will take up the responsibilities, and I hope the committee, when it engaged these state actors, and once this report is adopted by the House, then they have to do a follow-up. They have to write to these state actors and ask them that this is what the Senate has adopted, and this is what, according to your mandate, you are supposed to do. And I checked, one of them is that this country, we have an international law which we ratified, which we signed. That is the International Convention for Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. Kenya signed it in 2007, but it's yet to be ratified so that it becomes part of our laws. And you see, when we avoid this, then we are intentionally exposing ourselves or our citizens to lack of that kind of benefit of an international instrument which protects. Madam Speaker, even in the process you'll find, especially after the so-called 9/11, Kenyans have even been renditioned to foreign countries to undergo torture because of trying to get information from them, while we believe we have enough systems within our country. If any Kenyan is suspected to have committed a crime, then he should be subjected to the rule of law, and any aspect of justice need to be meted within the framework of law, because we have enough laws, and where there are loopholes, the committee must have identified, and the various organizations have been tasked to come together and address those issues. The figures involved here, you find, Madam Speaker, in this report are very material. Haki Africa is saying that it has recorded 81 cases of killings and 32 cases of disappearances, 56 of which the killings were by police, 16 by criminal gang, and 9 by private or public citizens. So it's very clear that the state is very much implicated in these cases. Uhuru also has its own data, which is 158 cases of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances documented in the coastal region. Coastal regions, the Muslims mainly are the ones who are bearing the brunt of these acts of unlawfulness by the state. So, Madam Speaker, I'd like to urge the committee to follow up, once the report is adopted by the House, to follow up the necessary state agents to provide the necessary instruments for organizations like, I can see from the report, IPOA, which is supposed to be the one where Kenyans report to when they have been, their rights have been infringed on by the police. We are even told it doesn't have its own independent lab where they can carry out forensic research. They still have to rely on the same police, which clearly hampers their work. Madam Speaker, these are all acts of commission by the state officers, but there are cases in this country where even the acts of omission become crime. Like for the past 3 years or so, in my county, Marsabit, we have had cases where the state organs have decided to look the other side and left the citizens to commit crimes against each other. That is still an act of omission on the side of the state actors, because while on this side they are the ones who are committing the crime, in other areas they look the other way, they leave the members of the public to illegally arm themselves and fight each other and kill each other, terrorize each other, raid each other and take livelihoods and lives of individuals. And when we as leaders ask them to act, they don't. They avoid completely acting. And that is still another act of, is a criminal act by the state actors by not acting. In this case, is a case of, is a crime of omission by refusing to perform their duty. We have had many cases where, because of the illegal firearms which are within the community, which are within the members of the public, and it's the responsibility of the government to disarm those illegal firearm holders, the government has not done that. And instead, because initially it was felt sometime back in the early 90s that a way of countering that kind of presence of illegal firearm and improving security within, especially the pastoralist communities, which cannot be covered by the current system of policing, where you have a police station somewhere covering a particular area, the police saw it fit to arm the civilians under the Kenya Police Reservists arrangement, which has been, for a greater extent, useful, because the importance of having those kinds of firearms is to deter and to counter the illegal firearm holders. When this issue started in Marsabit in 2018, the recent ones, we proposed that there should be disarmament of the illegal firearm holders and enhancement of the National Police Service as it is now known in the new Constitution and the new National Police Act. But what happened is contrary actually to what we said. The illegal firearm holders were left with their arms, and the NPR or the KPRs were disarmed, giving the illegal firearm holders a free hand committing crimes wherever they wanted. And it went ahead so much so that even the county headquarters was almost burnt down. It reached a time that the fight came into town, and there was nothing, the government's not doing anything. The other day, in fact, Thursday last week, within 1 kilometer or so of the police headquarters in the county, in broad daylight, around this time, around 5, a matatu carrying people who have come to town, who have come trading and going back, was just sprayed with bullets, and 6 people were killed and 8 were injured. And there was nothing. After that, there was no operation, there was nothing. So the illegal firearm holders will commit crime, go away, and the government system does not respond. As I'm talking even today, in my own county, between North Hor and Laisamis, 2 raids took place between last evening and today. 2 raids took place. People mobilized themselves, come with vehicles in broad daylight, to attack others, carry their livestock, kill people, injure others. But the nearest police post there, nobody is even bothered that something has happened. So there is a very, very serious crime of omission, refusal to provide security to Kenyans by the state actors, by the state agencies, in this case, the National Police Service, with different formations, like the anti-stock theft units, which are supposed to be very active in those areas. Where they are, they don't even move. So, Mr. Speaker, there is a very serious issue which we need to look at, that even where we are talking of acts of commission, here there are also serious acts of omission which are being perpetrated by the same state actors, and we need to take it seriously. I support the report and urge the committee that once it's adopted, they follow up the matrix and ensure that the relevant government entities identified there do perform the activities which are outlined within the given time, so that we can seal the loopholes which lead to the commission of these crimes of extrajudicial killing and enforced disappearances, and have Kenyans live without fear, especially from their own security organs which are supposed to protect them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Engineer Hagura. Senator Mudhama Agnes Kavindo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity you've given me to air my views also and to support this report by Senator Ongeri, together with the committee. Mr. Speaker, I concur with the rest of the senators that there's been...
Senator Mudhama Kavindo.
Yes.
The chair of the committee is Senator Okongo Omogeni.
Omogeni, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Senator Omogeni.
Yes, not
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that correction. About extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearance of our people in our country. And Mr. Speaker, we've spoken so much about only maybe the adults, but there is a lot of enforced disappearance of children. So I would request the committee also to put that in consideration, even as they write about the people. Mr. Speaker, every Kenyan has a right to live, or a right to life, according to our constitution, and even it's godly, because God gives life, and no one has a right to take anyone's life. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, just this September, one Abubakari was arrested from my county, Machakos, in a place called Tala, Abubakari Mulinduva, and he disappeared, and the next time he was seen he was in a mortuary, dead, and he was arrested. This is very wrong, and everyone should be taken to court if they've done anything wrong, so that they can be charged in the court of law. And Mr. Speaker, everyone has a right to be heard in a court of law, and everyone has a right to defend themselves, even those who are poor, who cannot defend themselves. The government has a right to give them lawyers to prevent them and to do their cases in court. Mr. Speaker, policemen, or those who arrest others, have a right to defend even the wrongdoers. They have no right to kill, because whether you are right or wrong, you have a right to live, unless proved otherwise, or you are judged for hanging, which I don't think it's a law in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, those people are so traumatized after they lose their loved ones in such a condition, or in such a manner, that they need also counseling. I would request the committee also to put that into consideration, that such people should go through counseling to come to be able to be helped to come into terms with their loss. and also be compensated even financially, materially, because most of these people who are killed are the bread earners of those families. And they leave maybe young children who need to go to school, they need wives, they leave mothers, they leave, their family members, and they need support because they are the ones who are supporting them. Mr. Speaker, I want to support this report by this committee and say that it should be supported and given the weight that it should have to see the light of the day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Thank you, Senator Agnes. Senator Christopher Langat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice on this. First, may I congratulate Senior Counsel Senator Omogeni and his team for doing this particular robust work that I'm so sure if it gets implemented in our country at this point of time, I tell you, Mr. Speaker, it's a game changer. I've read through this particular report, and it has really done a lot of work that I really pray that it sees the light of the day to save our country at this point of time. Police brutality and extrajudicial killing in this country, Mr. Speaker, is actually alarming. It is so bad that even international communities are wondering what's happening with our country. I was reading, I think 2 days ago, reports on Human Rights Watch about the extrajudicial killing in our country, and if you go through it, it is a reflection of a story that I read when I was in high school, Mr. Speaker, about a man who was called Tekayo in one of the short stories of Grace Okot. This is a man when he was heading the cattle, he saw an eagle that was flying, carrying a very live liver of a bird, of something, of a mysterious animal. This particular Tekayo was actually supposedly supposed to take care of the children. He was supposed to provide security to the family whenever the young parents goes to various places to search for food. But it turned later on that this particular greedy man became a security risk, and it was so difficult to discover his security risk tendencies because everybody was looking upon him to provide security. But ironically, he became a security risk. So you see, there is a lot of even challenges for any other group to investigate these particular challenges that we are facing currently, because the people who are supposed to provide security to our people in our country are the greatest security risk. It's interesting. So I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, that this particular extrajudicial killing in our country, abduction, illegal arrest of people in our society, every once and again, is a challenge. Even investigating it the same is also a challenge, because the people who are supposed to assist us to investigate these particular crimes are part of the same. I remember when we were when the Security Committee was interrogating the police after they had arrested us with Senator Malala and Dr. Lelekwe. Imagine even an hotel that Malala had mentioned in Thika. The DCI was denying that that hotel does not exist, yet everyone had Googled and discovered that the hotel was there. But he denied. And those are the people who are supposed to give us information, who are supposed to participate fully in providing security to the citizen, and you can see how naive or how pretenders they are on matters that are happening in our country. So I want to say that when I read about the same on Human Rights Watch, it points out to a broader problematic situation in our country, Mr. Speaker. It questioned even about the training, the current training of the police. It is interesting. I would like even to comment that the police are no longer supposed to be trained. They should be educated on research, investigation, ethics, discipline, professionalism, and so many other things. So I want to say that the recommendations that I have seen in this particular report are so important. I have gone through, I saw one recommendation, number one, out of the 21 recommendations I've seen, Mr. Speaker, they are so important. One recommendation is that the CS Interior and Coordination of National Government and the IG to make regulations on the use of force and firearms to guide the police officers. I want to say that this recommendation is so important because currently, if you see how the police officers are using force and firearms, it raises a lot of questions on the current policies guiding the police service. So I want to say this is very important, and the Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Matiang'i, it's now high time for him to stop politicizing the police force, the police service, and concentrate on coming up with effective policies that will help this particular service to work ethically and protect human beings. I've also seen another recommendation that the National Security Council to develop national security policy. This tells me that there are a lot of gaps, legislation, policy gaps, that the ministry should really streamline so that our police service may work in the right way, Mr. Speaker. I've also seen another recommendation that the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, policing oversight. This is a very important recommendation, Mr. Speaker, because any workforce without an oversight will end up doing things on their own, even if they are harmful. So this one should be done like yesterday, so that we may get a very important oversight body that will actually do an oversight to the police service so that our country may be safe. I've also gone through this. I've seen other recommendations, including here number 8, the Attorney General to initiate the establishment of multi-agency task force comprising of representatives from NPS, ODPB, IPOA, and the rest. If all these particular organizations, Mr. Speaker, work together, respect one another, come up with effective policies to support one another, this particular work of the police in our country will at least work in a better way to protect the citizen. I want to say also that a recommendation on disciplinary action. You see, sometimes these police, once they commit these particular crimes, it takes years for them to be disciplined. There are cases in court and for a long time. And I want to say that such issues should be made so urgent, and they should become actually, they should be given priority so that these particular officers may be punished or disciplined on time. Before, you know, when the cases takes a long time, they tend to lose meaning, and more often than not, there are a lot of interference, and that is why most of them finally get free, get scot-free out of their malice and their issues. The next one I've read is that the Attorney General, in consultation with the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, to operationalize the National Coroner Services Act and the Prevention of Torture Act. In fact, I was going through most of the new legislation last week, and I discovered that this country has come up with very many important legislative acts, but the greatest challenge is that they have not been implemented, up to and including one of ECDE, Mr. Speaker, whereby you and I, when we were members of Education Committee, we really worked on it seriously. It's interesting that you can still see some counties up to this particular time, they have not implemented, and even some are not aware that there is an act of parliament these days guiding early childhood education programs. So I want to say that these particular acts, which already they are law, they should actually be followed keenly so that they are followed and implemented effectively. I've also read somewhere here that the Cabinet Secretary, Interior, and the police, in fact, Inspector General, should liaise very closely with the Cabinet Secretary, Treasury, so that their budget is adjusted effectively to enable them to work effectively in this particular section. You know, it's so difficult, Mr. Speaker, to work when the particular department is least financed. They will not implement most of the things. For example, investigations, which take so many years to get the light of the day. So I also I appreciate that one of the recommendations is budgetary adjustment so that this particular department gets money to speed up their work. And I want to say also that you have seen currently that most of the police have turned against themselves. They are killing one another seriously through love triangles, issues on corruption, suspicion. You find themselves killing themselves seriously. And I want to comment also that, to recommend also that their in-service trainings should be updated to arrive at international standards. I tend to think that the in-services training that are taking place in this particular country among the police are outdated. They are still operating under the police force curriculum to guide their training. I want to recommend that a body should be set to investigate on the training programs and the in-service programs that these particular police are going through. Otherwise, there is a challenge in their behavior and their professional practices that calls upon that their training and in-service programs should be investigated, enriched, and even be improved on. I want to say that most of the countries, Mr. Speaker, have moved away from training to education, so that these particular people are given a wider education program that will enable them to get more skills and knowledge on human rights, the law, and many other things that will support them to work effectively. So I've read this particular recommendation, Mr. Speaker, most of them, and I'm so sure that if they are implemented, the recommendations on policy, recommendations on legislation, and recommendation on day-to-day work of this particular police is so important. So I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that these are very important report that I pray that we take it seriously. And I want also to say that we should come up with the committee we've been asking always, the Committee on Implementation. You see, most of the things that we come up with here, very important recommendations that can be used to change, to improve on policies in various departments in our country, up to this particular time, they are still attracting a lot of dust in shelves. And it is my prayer that we speed up the implementation committee so that they may act on daily service to follow up whatever recommendations we make, to see to it that they are followed and they are implemented to the letter. So I call upon this particular House to come up with that particular committee as soon as possible so that these particular important recommendations we've been making are implemented to assist Kenyans in this country. So I want to continue condemning the police brutality, extrajudicial killing, and many heinous things that our police are doing. I want to call upon them to act and protect human lives instead of becoming human risks in our society. I support this report, Mr. Speaker, and it is my prayer that it is implemented to the letter because it is a game changer in this particular country. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Langat. Minority Leader, Senator James Orengo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to begin by commending my chairman, the chairman of the Legal Committee. I think that if you look over the work that has been done by this committee on many issues, it is exemplary. And it's not just that he's a senior counsel, but I think it's also because he has a worldview and is strong on very fundamental issues that all the time we should be keeping at the back of our mind. And therefore, without a doubt, the committee of which I belong is in the able hands of Senior Counsel of Congo, or Mugeni. I want to state from the beginning that one of the most controversial discussions that we had during the constitution-making process was on Article 26 on the right to life. And the argument involved the religious community where the question of when does life begin in respect of an individual was at the center of the debate. And the community, the religious community insisted, particularly the Catholics, that life begins at conception. Life begins at conception. And that right to life is not something that is written for purposes of cosmetics or as something to make our constitution to be high-sounding. It is based on very old principles that has its genesis from the very existence of humanity. If you even look at the animal kingdom, one animal attacking another animal, or you find a lion attacking a buffalo, and not just a buffalo is attacking, the offspring. The buffaloes as a herd would, mobilize and defend the right of that offspring. So this is a very fundamental principle. And I want to say, without fear of contradiction, that when you find extrajudicial killing in any state, that is a trait and a character of a weak state. It's a trait and a character of a weak state. And in South America, where there was a lot of disappearances and extrajudicial killings, it happened when there were absolute dictatorships in South America. And you know what happened in the recent history to the extent now that, a lot of those states in Southern America, Latin America are now democratic states. You have less and less disappearances. Some may be out of drug wars in countries where there are issues with drugs and so on. But I want to repeat. Because some of the institutions that were created to protect the Bill of Rights of the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights and the power to look at the conduct of state institutions, particularly those state institutions that are given coercive powers, that they should ensure that the citizens of this country enjoyed fully the Bill of Rights. And their silence these days is bewildering, is completely bewildering. There was a time when we had people like Helef Khalifa in the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights, people like Maina Kiai that would take the state to account on any loss of life or to any conduct that undermined the Bill of Rights. So probably as we discuss this very important report, we should have a relook at these institutions which were created to ensure that probably we don't need to talk about these matters here, because there were special agencies with special jurisdiction under the Constitution to ensure that some of these things didn't happen. And Macharia Njeru, who is now in the Judicial Service Commission, his tenure in power, I think, was exemplary, because the police were all the time being taken into account. Now, Mr. Speaker, I will just and the Holy Bible, that God's wrath on man, at least from the biblical perspective, began with the eating of the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden. The second wrath is when Cain killed Abel. And Cain was said to be, one was a farmer and one was the herdsman. But, Mr. Speaker, when I was now looking at that same story in the Quran, I am truly, delighted by what the Quran says about this right to life. And I want to read it, what it says. I think it's chapter 5, verse 25 in the Quran. And the Holy Word says, "Prophet, tell them the truth about the story of Adam's two sons. Each of them offered a sacrifice, and it was accepted from one and not the other. One said, 'I will kill you,' but the other said, 'God only accepts the sacrifice of those who are mindful of him.'" Now, God was saying, the sacrifice by itself does not matter. The sacrifice only makes meaning when you are mindful of your Creator. That is what makes the sacrifice of significance to the Lord. Then he proceeds to say, "If you raise your hand to kill me, I will not raise mine to kill you." So this is something that comes from providence. It comes from the Almighty. That even in a situation where, there is justification, like it is provided in Section 26, Article 26 of the Constitution, that the state can intervene. But the scripture in the Holy Quran says, if you raise your hand to kill me, I will not raise mine to kill you. This is the holy word, that even where the state has justification, it can do anything but not kill. That's the word of the Lord. And we try all the time saying that, we are Christian or religious in our organization as a state. Every Madaraka Day, Jamhuri Day, we start by, having those prayers. So, from the beginning, this country has not done well. I think it comes from our history. When the colonial state was using the hand of the state and the power of the state to abduct, to kill, people who stood firm in the fight against colonialism and imperialism, and some were killed in the battlefield, some were arrested, like Dedan Kimathi, not really a proper trial, and even when he was hanged, we have no witnesses, and the grave of Dedan Kimathi is unknown today. That was the hand of the colonial government. You're killed, you're buried, and nobody can trace the day of that execution and where that great Kenyan was buried. And every day, Mashujaa Day and Jamhuri Day, we seek Dedan Kimathi's family. But we don't think about that original sin. That original sin. It is no excuse for the state to adopt anybody or take his life just on account of suspicion that he has committed an offense. Even on the face of evidence, like Senator Kabindi was saying, that person still has a right to be taken before a court of law, which will then make a determination on the innocence or guilt of that particular person. So I want to say that as we continue to laud ourselves as being a democratic country which believes in a constitution with a Bill of Rights, the question of extrajudicial killings has continued to be a challenge to our commitment to democratic ideals and human rights ideals. Particularly in the coast, I think the coast has suffered a lot of extrajudicial killings in the northeastern and even in Nairobi. The number of extrajudicial killings in Nairobi is something that sometimes we never know because there are incidences that never come to the public limelight. There are families who never come up to complain. Like I remember one time I dealt with a case which forever I'll never forget. There was a young man who came to me to act for him. He was originally part of Mungiki, but then he decided now to work with the state. And then there was an incident of crime that took place somewhere around Jerusalem in Eastlands. And the state thought that this young man had a hand in it. And he came to me and said, these people are looking for me, and if I go to the police stations without you, I am not going to survive. I know what they're going to do to me. Do me, Mr. Speaker, this young man came to my office, and on my word, when I convinced him to go to the police, as I thought he should, that's the last I saw of him and that's the last I heard of him. And the family who continued to talk to me on that issue, in the end, they also said they were in danger in pursuing that matter, and that just the thing went cold. Up to now, that young man, that's one of the things I've done in my profession that I've forever regretted, or this particular young man. So the state now should know that with this written constitution that we have, they have no excuse in trying to deal with the incidences of either insecurity or incidences of crime and take people's lives without justification. And if there's justification, it should be within the legal parameters, which means that if it happens, then you're able to go to the court of law and demonstrate that the state was justified in carrying out, a killing, either in self-defense or the person was, a danger to the community or the people around him or to the state institutions, including the police. I hope that with this report, we can have a new paradigm shift because I think this report speaks for itself on what should be done, the law that should be put in place, how the police should behave. And, sometimes when we say these things, it's not that we don't realize that we have a very good police force. We have a good police service. We appreciate that all the time. And our criticism should not be seen to be that we're having doubt with what the police are doing. And if you go to states where the police force does not exist, or the military try to act as a police, you would be amazed about how inept other non-police forces or institutions can deal with the, civilians or with the people generally. So we think that we have a professional police service, but they should live by the edicts of the Constitution, because the Constitution itself says they should abide by the Bill of Rights. And therefore, I hope that in approving this report, Mr. Speaker and our chairman, we should not delay in proceeding with making those legislative proposals and coming out with a bill that then would try to deal firmly with the question of abductions, disappearances, and extrajudicial killings. In my life, I've always said that perfect murders can only be committed by state institutions, like Jem Kariuki, Robert Ouko, Tom Boyer. Those were extrajudicial killings. Juma, recently, even there's a question about Ronald Ngala. An ordinary person, or even a cartel of criminals, or a cabal of evil forces, unless they're in charge of the state, for them to commit a perfect crime is always very difficult. So to have an offense which is committed that the state cannot unravel is extremely difficult, extremely difficult. And I believe up to now that we never came to know the killers of Jem Kariuki, Tom Boyer, Pinto, Juma, as my colleague Justice Mazayo is telling me. we never came to know of those who were responsible for perpetrating those heinous crimes, because the state was involved. And sometimes even state institutions can pretend to take you through judicial processes, like Adungosi, that young man. That was an extrajudicial killing, because you know, extrajudicial killing is not about the police. Even the courts can be used. Like the court system was used against Jomo Kenyatta. I mean, Jomo Kenyatta, this trial was a sham. And you find a judiciary that was not independent, that was being used by the colonial powers, condemned the Kapenguria 6 to long jail terms. And thank God for at least for those 6, they came out alive. But knowing the conditions of detention at that time, some of them could not have come out alive, so to speak. So I would want to say that with the focus on the coast, because this matter has come out many times, Senator Faki has been very, very concerned about this every time, raising questions. And I've heard even the Deputy Minority Leader talking on this question with a lot of vehemence and emotion. And to that extent, I hope that in passing this report, we should come out with the appropriate legislation, but also the right training for our law institutions, because what the Constitution says how, you know, we should deal even with crime. Commission of crime is not a basis for violating the Constitution or violating the Bill of Rights. So I support the report and commend my chairman and the committee to which I belong. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minority Leader. Senator Stewart Mazayo.
Asante Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, yangu yalikuwa maoni tu kwamba nilipoketi hapa tokea niingie niketi hapa, nimemsikiza kiongozi wa walio wachache, ndugu yangu wakili James Orengo, senator wa Siaya. Na ukiweza kuketi hapa na kusikiza, utaona ya kwamba unaweza kujifunza mengi katika vile anavyosema kulinganishana na ile experience yako nayo.
Samahani, uliongea kuhusu mswada huu jana.
Ndio. Lakini sasa Bwana Spika, siongee kuhusu mswada. Nakwambia niko na maoni, nilikuwa nataka kusema yanayohusikana na vile ndugu yangu James Orengo alivyoweza kueleza ama kufafanua huo mjadala.
Nadhania ingekuwa katika hoja ya nidhamu ndiposa uweze kuelezea.
Basi niruhusu basi niweze kuongea kwa hoja ya nidhamu.
La hasha. La hasha, kwa sababu si hoja ya nidhamu, tayari alikuwa amaliza kuongea.
Sasa nashukuru Bwana Spika.
I call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I first want to thank all the speakers who have spoken in contribution of this very important on extrajudicial killing. I want to thank our former Attorney General Emeritus, Senator Hamus Wako, who informed us yesterday that he was the man behind the idea of forming IPOA. I also want to thank my predecessor, the former chair of the committee, Senator Samson Cherargei, who did the bulk of the work in collection of the material that has been used in preparation of this report. I want to thank Senator for Migori, my good friend and learned friend, Dr. Ochilo Ayako. I want to thank the Senator for Kilifi, Justice Stuart Mazayo. I want to thank Senator for Mombasa, Senator Munyaji Faki. And here I want to take note of the fact that indeed Senator Faki hosted the committee when they went on a fact-finding mission in Mombasa, and the bulk of the names of the victims of extrajudicial killings actually are residents of the county of Mombasa. So we thank Senator Faki for having been a very good host, for tracing the many, many families that were victims of extrajudicial killings. In fact, it was through Senator Faki that we were able to get linkage to these families. I also want to thank Senator for Kericho, Senator Aaron Cheruiyot. I want to thank, with distinction, my vice chair, though not a lawyer, but a very active member of my committee, vice chair, Senator Naomi Wako, Senator Gertrude Musruve, who is, as always, is very passionate on issues that are brought to the House. And we had this afternoon, Engineer Argura Godana, Senator for Kericho Christopher Langat, and then our most distinguished and long-serving members of Parliament, Senator Moses Wetangula and Senator James Aggrey Orengo. Mr. Speaker, you agree with me that having listened to Senator Orengo quote the Quran this afternoon, he is a man who has got a lot of passion on issues touching on constitutionalism, human rights, and the rule of law. And I think we should induct him in this House as one of the most profound believers in constitutionalism, rule of law, and protection of human rights. I want to say the same for Senator Wetangula. I think these are senators, whenever they rise to make a contribution, they never disappoint. And we listened to him this afternoon, and he was also very passionate on his contributions. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of issues that this committee takes note of that have been brought to the fore by contributions from many senators. And I hope the members of Judiciary who are watching the Senate live will remember the contribution of Senator Faki in terms of the timelines that our judiciary takes to hear and determine cases that involve police officers who are involved in extrajudicial killings. Mr. Speaker, you had Senator Faki give an example of what happened in the US, the case that involved the black American Jimmy Floyd, who was killed by a police officer. That death happened last year, and the conviction took place, I think within a period of 9 months. The case had been concluded, a conviction passed, and the police officer who was involved sentenced to a period of 23 years. I think what has come from the contributions is that the judiciary stands indicted, Mr. Speaker, because of the long period that it takes to hear and conclude cases generally. But what is more worrying, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that we don't have many convictions from our courts of law. So my committee takes note of that concern, and we'll see whether there is any legislative intervention that can be made to address this issue. Mr. Speaker, some of us who are practitioners know that a few years back, we had very few magistrates in the country. But now we have, the Judicial Service Commission has employed so many judicial officers, especially magistrates. I think early this year, I saw an advert where Judiciary was recruiting, if I remember well, close to 100 magistrates. And I think with this increased number of judicial officers, Mr. Speaker, this is a matter that the judiciary should address so that cases of this nature are heard and determined within the shortest time possible. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that has been that has come up in the course of debate on this matter is the need for this House to consider bringing back the implementation committee. Because if you look at the report that we have presented before the Senate, we have given timelines within which certain actions should be taken. Some of these actions are legislative, but there are other administrative and policy interventions that we want the government to effect. And unless we have a committee that is in place that can monitor, and also take into account, Mr. Speaker, that the life of this Senate will come to an end by August next year, this report may end up gathering dust somewhere in a shelf. So I think the issue that has been brought before us in the course of this debate on the need to again reconsider the issue of having an implementation committee is important, and I think it's something that we should explore avenues of implementing. Mr. Speaker, another concern is the lackluster performance of the statutory bodies that are supposed to keep an eye on the conduct of these rogue police officers or the police officers who commit some of these human rights transgressions. And I think two bodies have come on the spot in the course of debate on this matter. The first one is Independent Police Oversight Authority. Mr. Speaker, I was privileged to have been in the panel that interviewed the first commissioners for IPOA, because at that time the law provided that, and I think the law is still the same now, that various bodies were to nominate representatives. And I was nominated by Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission as its then chairman to sit in the interview panel. And I am the one of those people who recommended Macharia Njeru to the position of chair. And I must say, he did well. He didn't disappoint. But my good friend who took over, Makori, who is a good friend of mine and a lady I know, a lady I respect, I think needs to also put some punch in ensuring that she exercises proper oversight over our police officers. Because, Mr. Speaker, we are talking about people. Police officers are people who are carrying a weapon that can kill you. In the spark of a minute, you are gone. So when we have officers who are trigger happy, they are danger to society. They are danger to all of us. You are not safe. I'm not safe. Your constituents are not safe. Your children are not safe. So everybody is not safe. So this body was created mirroring the fact that after the passage of the new constitution, 2010, the police force was being transformed from a police force to a police service. That's why we have National Police Service, not National Police Force. So I think this IPOA, they should up their game. We want to see them more passionate on this matter so that they can provide proper oversight on the police officers. I think another body that has come on focus, Mr. Speaker, is the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the national statutory body created by the Constitution to provide oversight on human rights abuses and report to Parliament on the status of human rights in this country. When we had minor KI, that body was very fair, and we all used to hear about that commission on a day-to-day basis. But I think in the last 5 years or so, the spark has gone down. The fire is not there. We don't hear that commission. We don't hear about that commission a lot. And we really want to appeal to those who are serving as commissioners, to take that as a calling. It's really a calling, and I hope it's not just a matter of people applying for positions, and once they get the positions, that is it. I think that's a huge responsibility that the people of Kenya have placed on that commission, and we need to see more. You remember the days of our former colleague, Senator Omar Hassan. Maybe, Mr. Speaker, if I ask senators in the House who are the commissioners currently, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, we may not know. I mean, yet you can see that 10 years down the line, we still remember that Maina Kiai served as a chair of that commission. We still remember that Omar Hassan was a vice chair of that commission. So what happened? What went wrong? It means that the occupants of that position are just ticking boxes. It's business as usual for them. Yet you can see from our report, Mr. Speaker, the number of deaths that we are talking about. More than 1,000 deaths in the hands of uniformed police officers. That's a big indictment on us as a country. Another issue that came up, which my committee will take up, is what was proposed by Senator Wetangula, the need for refresher courses for our police officers. Mr. Speaker, even as senators, we continue learning. Every now and then, committees go outside for benchmarking experiences. We go for retreats for training. Our staff go for retreats for training. So even the police need periodic refresher courses. In my profession, as lawyers, you cannot get your license renewed each year unless you have done continuous legal education training. Every year. If you have not gone for continuous legal education, you will not, and get 5 units, your license will not be renewed. And yet, as we don't deal with human life as such, but we are talking about police officers, armed, carrying weapons, live ammunition. This is something that the Commissioner, Inspector General of Police should implement as soon as possible. Even doctors, Mr. Speaker, accountants, they all do refresher courses every year. Because this is the only way, Mr. Speaker, we can create a responsive police force, one that appreciates that it's there to be a service to the people of Kenya, but is not there, to display their mighty and force on innocent Kenyans. As was stated by Senator for Kilifi, Senator Mazayo, we should not allow this situation to reach a state of total absurdity, where you have a case like what I highlighted before the House, where a child who is 4 years old, armless child, is shot dead by an armed policeman. What threat can a 4-year-old pose to an armed policeman. It's an absurdity, and that's something that we should not really allow. So, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all the speakers who made their contribution, and my committee is determined to ensure that we promote the rule of law in this country, and the adage that no man should ever be allowed to be a judge of his own cause should be protected and respected. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Omogeni. Honorable Senators, pursuant to Standing Order 79-1, I determine the motion in question does not affect counties. I now put the question that the Senate adopts the report of Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs, and Human Rights on the inquiry into extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearance in Kenya, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 19th October 2021. As many as of that opinion say aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 22, motion. Adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights on a statement sought by Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., MP, regarding delays in the appointment of judges of the High Court and the Court of Appeal.
Chairman, Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Senate adopts the report of the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights on a statement sought by Honorable Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., MP, regarding delays in the appointment of judges of the High Court and the Court of Appeal, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 19th of October, 2021. Mr. Speaker, this report arises from a statement that was sought by Honorable Senator Mutula Kilonzo, Member of Parliament for Makwiny, on the 5th of May, 2020. Mr. Speaker, the history surrounding this statement is that the Judicial Service Commission, which is the body constitutionally mandated to recruit, or rather to recruit and recommend names of persons to be appointed judges, commenced a process of nominating judges of the Court of Appeal and the High Court on the 15th day of February 2019. Arising from that process, Mr. Speaker, the Judicial Service Commission, in compliance of all the constitutional provisions and statutory provisions, undertook a comprehensive exercise on recruitment of judges. Mr. Speaker, as a way of background, on the 15th day of February 2019, the JSC gave notice of vacancies and invited applicants to apply for vacant positions of judges, which were given as follows. On the Court of Appeal, they had 11 vacancies. In the Environment and Land Division of the High Court, they had 20 vacancies, and in the Employment and Labor Relations, they declared 20 vacancies. The Speaker, the committee was able to ascertain that in order to make the exercise very transparent, the Judicial Service Commission did proceed, and on the 22nd of February 2019, they actually carried an advert in the daily newspapers inviting qualified Kenyans to offer themselves as candidates to be interviewed for their aforesaid position. Mr. Speaker, the adverts attracted a number of qualified candidates who applied for those positions. In the case of Court of Appeal, Mr. Speaker, we had a total of 113 qualified Kenyans who applied, and the Judicial Service Commission, as is required by law, shortlisted a number of, a total of 35 candidates. From that number, after interviews, they were able to select 11 persons. Out of these 11 persons, Mr. Speaker, some development has taken place during the pendants of this statement, and I want to report to the House that His Excellency the President has since gazetted and sworn in 7 judges of the Court of Appeal. So the number of judges remaining to be appointed has since now changed to 4 instead of the initial 11. Now, in the position of judge on the Environment and Land Court, a total of 229 Kenyans expressed interest in that position. And in the Employment and Labor Relations, we had a total of 160 applicants. Mr. Speaker, in the Land and the Environment, we only had 20 vacancies, and in the Employment and the Labor Court, we had 10. A number of developments have taken place since then, Mr. Speaker, because out of the list of 10 names that were forwarded to the President for the labor and employment, the President has since appointed all the judges, so the matter is mute on that particular division. However, on the land and environment, the President has declined, as of today, to appoint 2 judges, Evans Kiago Makori and Judy Cheruyot Elizabeth Omange. So those are the 2 candidates who have since not been appointed to their respective positions. So in total, Mr. Speaker, as of today, the names that are of concern to the Senate are 6, 4 judges of the Court of Appeal and 2 judges of the High Court. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, out of the 41 candidates whose names were forwarded to the President, during this long wait, one of them unfortunately died. And on behalf of this Senate, we want to send our condolences to the widow and to the children of that family. Mr. Speaker, we were able to get reports that the family faced very agonizing moments because they waited for a period of more than 1 year, 3 months for the husband of the home to be sworn in as a judge, but he died before realizing his dreams. It's a very sad happening, and we want to register our condolences to the family. So he died before realizing his dream of becoming a judge. Mr. Speaker, in the course of preparation of this report, we have looked at various jurisdictions. And Mr. Speaker, what runs through is that most progressive countries have tried to take away this power of appointment of judges from the executive. If I give the history of Kenya, during the pre-colonial days, Mr. Speaker, their appointment of judges was a preserve of the executive. The president had a free hand on picking who was to occupy the position of Chief Justice, a judge of Court of Appeal, and judge of the High Court. And that position continued in the early days of our independence. So, Speaker, even after we created a body called the Judicial Service Commission, the precursor to the current Judicial Service Commission, still it was full of presidential appointees, because the Attorney General used to be a member, judges of the Court of Appeal used to be members, judge of the High Court, and then the Chief Justice. Needless to say, Mr. Speaker, that the Chief Justice under the former Constitution used to be an appointee of the executive. So the process was never transparent, it was opaque, it was based on political patronage, and nobody really understood how judges were picked. I'll give an interesting story on what happened when I was serving as the chair of Law Society of Kenya. I once got a call from the late Chief Justice, Evan Sigisheru, that the president was requesting for names of candidates to be appointed judges. And therefore, the Law Society should also send in proposal. Because there was no legal framework on how these people are picked. It was a fairly opaque system based, I think, on who knows who. So excitedly, I called my counsel, and we came up with a number of names on candidates to be picked as judges. And indeed, one of the lawyers received a call from Eldoret, and he was told, now come to Nairobi, you are needed in the State House tomorrow to be appointed as a judge. And he received a ticket. He was given a ticket from the government, from the Judiciary, and he was told, you come with one person. So he said, I'll come with my wife. So a ticket was sent for him and his wife. Then he was told, when you come to Nairobi, you will find we have booked a hotel for you. So he came to Nairobi, he had a hotel booked for him, and he was told, come at 9:30 to chambers of the Honorable Chief Justice. And then you will go to State House and be sworn in as a judge. Mr. Speaker, that lawyer took the flight from Eldoret to Nairobi. He slept with his wife, having told his friends, I will be sworn in as a judge tomorrow. When he woke up at 9:30, he went to the Chief Justice's chambers. He was told, you know, the president has removed your name and replaced yours with somebody else. I mean, you can imagine, that's the kind of system that we had. And you know, he was traumatized. He tried to go to court, say, you know, I'd already been picked, but you know, there was no legal framework to govern a transparent, professional way of picking judges. And in fact, it's that case that informed the campaign by the Law Society of Kenya. And I was a member of the Law Society when we did this chapter on Judiciary. That's why we pushed for an open, transparent process of picking judges. We had a big debate with my colleague, Senator Amos Wako, when we were debating this chapter on Judiciary. And I remember at one time, Senator Wako told us, as Law Society of Kenya, that how can you imagine? I mean, how can you think in your normal heads that a person who wants to be a Chief Justice can sit down to write an application to Judicial Service Commission to be appointed a judge, a Chief Justice? He said this is something that should be done by the president. The president knows all the lawyers. He can decide who is befitting to occupy that position. But we reminded him that even our colonial master, UK, had just come from UK at that time. I remember I was in UK in October of 2008. And I told him, even our colonial masters were moving away from that opaque system where the Queen had the last say. And that's, if you look at the chapter on Judiciary, it was meant to limit the involvement of the executive on the appointment of judges. That's why the representative of the JSC has 2 members representing Law Society of Kenya, 2 members representing the public, 2 on the representation from the Judiciary. And again, I remember Amos Wako objecting, saying our proposal was going to introduce politics in Judiciary. We insisted that if it's the Supreme Court, they should elect their representative. If it's the Court of Appeal, they should elect their representatives. If it's the High Court, they should elect their representative. If it's the magistrates, they should elect their representative, so that there is some form of independence for on that body called Judicial Service Commission, so that when they are picking candidates, Mr. Speaker, it's not based on any political affiliation or on any political patronage, but purely on professional qualifications. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if you read the Bomas draft, Parliament was supposed to vet, after the JSC had recommended, Parliament was supposed to vet. But we fought very hard as a law society then to remove Parliament because we did not want politics to be introduced on the judiciary. We wanted this to be very professional. Therefore, as I speak this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the country where we came from. As we were discussing this debate, we had on the table the Kofi Annan report, the discussions that emanated from Serena. And you were told, Mr. Speaker, that Kenyans butchered each other after the 2007 disputed elections because they did not have trust on the judiciary. We had on the table the Kriegler report, and it made a very strong recommendation that going forward, the process of picking judges should be independent and insulated from the executive. It's on record. All those reports are there, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, the chapter on judiciary, having listened to the people of Kenya, Kofi Annan, Kriegler report recommended that the executive should not play a role on the appointment of judges. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you that we had on the table the provisions of Section 174 of the South African Constitution, which has a provision to the effect that when the Judicial Service Commission carries out interviews and proposes names to the president, they should give 3 names for each position. But again, because of our history, Mr. Speaker, because of where we had come from, we again rejected that proposal and said that only 1 name for each declared vacant position should be forwarded to the president. Because Kenyans knew that the idea of politicization of the judiciary is what had made Kenyans to lose confidence in that institution. We had another subclause of the South African Constitution, which says that before you appoint the Chief Justice and the Deputy Chief Justice in South Africa, you must consult other political parties in the parliament. But we said in Kenya, because of our history, because of where we were coming from, we do not want politics to play any role, Mr. Speaker. The only compromise that we came up with is to say, for the heads of the institution, the Chief Justice and the Deputy Chief Justice, we will allow the National Assembly to vet the nominees, Mr. Speaker. That is the only window that was given to the political class. So what was the intention of the people of Kenya? If you read the Bomas draft constitution, it was that we should draw a demarcation line on the institution of the judiciary and the executive, and make the judiciary an independent institution. If you read the Committee of Experts report, it's the same thinking, Mr. Speaker, that we should draw a line on what the executive should be able to do and what the judiciary should do, Mr. Speaker. And that is not just in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, if you go to other jurisdictions, progressive jurisdictions, the same reforms have taken place, Mr. Speaker. If you go to England, they have even become more radical than us, and those were our colonial masters, Mr. Speaker. The chairman of a body that recommends appointment of judges is a lay person. He's a lay person. And the Queen
the executive plays no role. It's liberal. It's become very, very progressive. And they advertise the vacancies, people apply, you are interviewed, because the position of a judge, you are going to serve the public, Mr. Speaker. And I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, look at history. Presidents will come and go, but the judges will remain. When the founding father of this great country called United States of America, George Washington, appointed the first Chief Justice, he did not appoint him to serve him. He appointed him to serve the country. Mr. Speaker, the first Supreme Court judge who was taken to the Senate for impeachment, Samuel Chase, was appointed by George Washington. Yet, the president who wanted to have him removed was Thomas Jefferson, long after George Washington had left office. So what point am I making, Mr. Speaker? That let's look at the institution called Judiciary, that as an institution that is there for posterity. It serves generations. It's not there, Mr. Speaker, to serve one president. It is not there to serve a political party that is in power at that given time. The judiciary is there to serve for posterity, Mr. Speaker. In the United States of America, Mr. Speaker, the Supreme Court judges serve for life. They serve for life. You will find that the judge, like Chief Justice William, who was appointed by Ronald Reagan in 1980, served for 24 years. So long after Reagan had left office, he still continued being the Chief Justice. The judges who were picked by the Federalist President, John Adams, like Marshall, the fourth Chief Justice of the United States of America, served long after Adams had left office. In fact, Adams appointed him towards the tail end of his tenure in office because he only served one term, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, what we are saying as a committee is that an institution of this importance, called the judiciary, should not be allowed to serve at the mercy of the executive, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kongo Omugeni, you have a balance of 39 minutes when this motion comes on the floor again for debate. Honorable Senators, it is now 6:30, time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until Thursday, 11th November 2021 at 2:30 p.m.